Hello. Welcome to the October 20th, 2016 Downtown Design Review meeting. And we are going to have a very exciting meeting today, so we're going to clip right along here. Please turn off your cell phones or any noisemakers that could interrupt the proceedings. And we're going to start with roll call.
Betsy Brunstetter.
Present.
Gigi Faulkner. Charles Ainsworth. Corey Bates. Present. Nathaniel Harding. Present. Connie Scothorn. Present. Danielle Theriault. You have a quorum.
Thank you. We're assuming everyone has read their minutes. Do we have any changes to the minutes or a motion for approval?
Move to approve.
Second.
That is Bates and Theriault. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We have no cases withdrawn.
We have a continuance request, which is item D on your agenda, DTCA 16-00124 at 113 Northwest 5th Street. The owner's representative has requested a continuance, and they have stated they have no objection to a presentation and discussion on this matter after the continuance has been voted on. Their design professional team is here from Atlanta, so they're wanting to benefit from your input on this project.
Okay, quickly, let's vote on the continuance. Do we have a motion?
Move to continue.
Second.
That was Harding and Theriault. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Oh,
I'm sorry, continue till the November 17th meeting.
Say it again. I'll move to continue.
Thank you.
To the September or the November meeting. Is that what you said?
Yes.
and second? Second. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So we will move this to the heel of the docket for a presentation. Our next item, we do have a presentation on the convention center. Is the presenter present? Hi there.
Hi, I'm Adam Polish with Populous, here with my colleagues Todd Voth and Kevin Cook.
Okay. And Adam, have you written your name down on that? You can do it afterwards or whatever,
Okay.
but just so we have a record.
I'll do it while she's on the presentation.
And we are hoping this clips along. I know it's a big project, but we have a big agenda.
I got it.
Also, Adam, you know, we'll be looking down at our screens, so we're not playing with our phones or anything. We're really
I
paying
know.
attention.
I think this is the 15th time I'm giving this presentation, so
Okay.
that's good. So just real quick, we've been, in designing this project for about 10 months now, since January. It's been a very inclusive process with our respective subcommittees, the Citizens Advisory Board, and with City Council. So what you're seeing today is a collaborative effort from multiple parties in the city. We're very open with our design process, and so far the feedback has been really great from our city partners on how we've executed the design. So to clip along, we use these design principles. If you kind of read them quickly, it's less about a building. It's more about how the building affects the city, the visitor experience, the pedestrian district, connections to the park. There's a lot of wonderful infrastructure that the city has taken the initiative to design for this new entertainment district. So convention centers nowadays are less about the building. It's more about getting people into your city and then out to experience all the wonderful things that your city has to offer. So again, that's been our main focus in the design of this building. Our design story, obviously we've been through many iterations, but because of the significance of the core to shore development and the lack of current development on the site, our design story has been core to shore, earth to sky. So specifically, if you look at the diagram, the way where our building sits in this core to shore development is essentially right smack in the middle. So taking some cues from the architecture from downtown, some of the more modern aesthetics of the Boathouse District and all of the kind of unique, more modern aesthetics that have been developed over the years. And then when you think of earth to sky, how the building touches the ground, what that's like from a pedestrian standpoint, and of course, we all know Oklahoma City, we have expansive horizons and sunsets, so how the building touches the sky and how it faces back towards downtown is important. We have 3 entries. They correspond directly to what's happening to the park across the streetcar just to the northeast, or northwest, I'm sorry, and then to the potential hotel that has been recently proposed over the past few weeks. So again, plugging into those specific locations for all the other infrastructure that's happening. Our building is predominantly west-facing, so we know that there's going to be some climate issues managing the sun. So we've taken some architectural moves to protect the building in a passive manner. The use of shades, architectural overhangs, high-performing glass with a slight reflectivity. Again, so utilizing all of the kind of architectural, methods and means and methods to kind of manage the exposure to this. It's a unique condition because there really is nothing to protect the building from the western sun. So again, architecturally, it's important that we develop that language. In designing the building, it's approximately 600 feet long, north to south, about 100 feet tall, so about the same height as Chesapeake Arena. And with a 600-foot-long facade, there's a lot of potential for it to be kind of ominous and monotonous. And so we've broken the building up into these 3 scales that you'll see as we go through the renderings. So as I said, we came to the subcommittee with about 40 options and went to 10 options, 8 options, 1 option. And this is the option that we developed. Again, it's something that we're proud of, and you can see how the program has led to these unique forms that protect the building and then provide a little bit of difference in the scale of the different program areas. So standing in the park, you start to really understand the scale of the facility and how it rises above the tree line in the park. The building is broken up onto 3 levels. We have our ground level, which is our exhibit hall. We have our meeting room level, which is approximately 24 feet in the air. Then we have our ballroom level, which is about 52 feet in the air. So again, you can see the scale of the building, the 3 unique architectural forms. The palette that we've been kind of mining, if you think about downtown, it's very civic. We have a lot of stone architecture. Natural palette, and so what we've tried to do is take that palette and kind of rethink it a little bit to give it a little bit more of a modern aesthetic to start to fit in with more of the recent developments that have happened around the city. Specifically, the redevelopment of Union Station, we've used that as a inspiration to us as far as the terracotta roof, the limestone facade. So we're really trying to use that as an inspiration to start to acknowledge some of these materials that we have on our facility. So this is looking south on the new Robinson Street. We have our meeting room program that flanks the north and the south of the facility. The meeting rooms, which is pretty unique to most convention centers, are actually pushed out onto the glass. There's a huge push in the industry for natural light, wellness, all of these things that are historically not happening in convention centers. So again, pulling these meeting rooms out to the glass and obviously protecting the architecture, but opening up the lid a little bit and allowing these views out to downtown and to the park across the street. A nighttime view. I want to call out the ballroom in this view. We're working with some really experienced and thoughtful lighting designers on how we can start to craft this ballroom experience. We like to call the ballrooms the meeting room, or the living room of the city. It should be your most prominent space, your most prominent sellable space in the city, so crafting that ballroom experience to tell a good story. And you'll see in a future rendering that the view that it provides over the park is quite dynamic. So again, you start to acknowledge the size of the building, how it touches the ground. We designed these plaza spaces to the west to plug into the park, to allow for full exiting capacity for a large event in the convention center. We specifically pulled the building off of the curb to allow for this flow of pedestrians back and forth to the park. The last thing we want to do is to have a full convention, and when we throw people out onto the street for an exiting condition, they need some room, some buffer room to congregate and either go back to the hotel or public transportation or whatever they're doing. And, you know, this rendering right here is probably one of my favorite because we all know that what's happening there today looks absolutely nothing like this. And if we can imagine, you know, 5 or 10 years down the road, we have a developed park, we have a convention center framing this gateway into the city coming north on Robinson, and you see Devon Tower and the skyline in the background. So again, it starts to tell a powerful story. Interior, the new generation, as I said, of convention centers, it's about letting the light in and sending people out. It's almost exactly opposite of what we currently have at Cox Center. So here you can see some of the triple height spaces that we have for pedestrian circulation, allowing the natural light, exposing the different levels of the building, and providing, you know, patrons that place to congregate and to truly experience a first-class interior design experience. Again, some of the lobby spaces with looking out to the west. And this is important because, like I said, the ballroom is one of the most prominent spaces in the building. We call this the Painted Sky Ballroom. We're exploring materials with some reflectivity. And the plan is we have a 30,000 square foot ballroom with these vertical lifting walls that open up to a 10,000 square foot pre-function and then to this 5,000 square foot balcony to the west. So your ballroom can essentially transform from a 30,000 square foot space to a 45,000 square foot space with all the appropriate amenities. And here's the view standing on the balcony looking across the park. It's a little bare to the west as it is today, but ideally in the future there will be some development across the western edge of the park. But it's important to note how we frame the views to downtown. Across the park, you can see the revamped Union Station, and then, of course, Skydance Bridge to the south. So truly giving you that panoramic view and opening up and exposing, future guests to what Oklahoma City has to offer. So that is what we have. Thank you.
So I'd like to give the committee an opportunity to ask questions about this.
Absolutely.
I think this is great. I think it looks great. Presentation was very nice. I think this is really going to be a wonderful contribution to the city. I very much appreciate the connection that the building's making to the park, and in a number of ways. Certainly at street level, I appreciate pulling the building back and having some buffer at ground level. One for functionality of the convention center, but also to not be imposing on the park at ground level. Yet at the same time, the building, as it climbs to its height, comes back to that street edge. And when you look down Robinson, you can still have a presence of the building at the street. I think the style's in line with what's being proposed for the buildings within the park. So I think there's connections to be had there. And then the scale of the building as a whole, I appreciate the way it's been broken down into smaller elements to, again, not be that imposing. Moving forward, I would suggest, with all the attention that's being paid to the west facade, to not forget about the east facade as well. The edge of the park is not the edge of downtown, and I wouldn't want the building as a whole to create an edge in the urban fabric and to neglect kind of the east side of the building and what's going on over there as well.
Absolutely. It's definitely been brought up in our subcommittees, obviously not really highlighted in this presentation, but specifically we're now in talks with the hotel developers, any kind of future expansion to the south, and then, of course, acknowledging any kind of development that happens to the east of the building, knowing that it is a back door, but it's not a back door. And so we're definitely, looking at architectural systems to make that a pedestrian-friendly experience, knowing that it isn't the west facade, but knowing that it still has to be comfortable and acknowledge, an inviting environment to the east of the building. So I really appreciate the commentary. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the committee?
Well, I think it looks great. I think it's going to be I love the way it blends with the park. I was curious about parking. Is that under the building?
So, the parking's kind of been the hot topic during this whole thing. But I can say that there are plans for parking around the building, whether it's a garage or a surface lot. It's outside of our scope, but we have acknowledged the locations where we think it would fit. A lot of it has to do with the hotel developer as well. But we are currently in the middle of a traffic and parking study to just acknowledge how cars will circulate around the site, knowing that this is something completely new to Oklahoma City. So again, it's kind of an ongoing thing. And our project is just a small piece in the actual district plan. So,
Well, thank you very much.
thank you.
Appreciate you
Absolutely.
presenting. Moving down the agenda, we have the consent docket. Laura?
The two items you have on the consent docket went to the Arts Commission, and so I need to report to you that the Arts Commission recommended approval of both of those items. We didn't have that information when we put the packet together.
Okay, great. Do I have a motion on the consent docket?
Move to approve the consent docket?
Second.
That's Bates and Terrio. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent docket is approved. I am going to use my power to move a couple of the items around on the cases for individual consideration. I'd like to move items E and C up. Is there a representative for the 420 Northwest 5th project here in the... Would you like to come forward and present your project, please?
I'd like, sorry, it went away, excuse me. I need to point out that in the staff report, we reference that there are 4 wall signs, but there's actually 5, and that is shown on the drawing. Those are the ones in red. So I just wanted to clarify that point. And we, the dumpster in question, there's a picture of the existing dumpster in your packet that shows that it was partially screened, and when they came in for this project, it's not this item. We went to 1673. When they came in for this project, that became an issue, and so since we require by ordinance that they have to have total site-proof screening, their proposal is not for site-proof screening because they have some security safety issues at this location, and so they are actually having to get a variance for the decorative metal fence that they're putting up instead, but they're not changing the location. It's currently that way. And I'll point out that it's down here at this location, which is it's not on a street side. It's basically the back side, alley side of the site. This facility takes up half of the block and has 3 street frontages.
Okay. Has everyone had a chance to review this, and do you have any questions, or do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve the application on the basis that the project complies with the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in Section C and D of the staff report, with the condition that, A, the applicant obtains a variance from the requirement that dumpsters be visually screened from view on all sides.
That was excellent.
I just read it.
Yes. Gold star.
Okay, that was Bates and Harding. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Do we?
I
Yeah, thank you.
also move to provide a recommendation of approval to the Board of Adjustment for variance from the requirement that dumpsters be visually screened from view on all sides.
Second.
That was a Bates and Terrio motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you
You
for
are
your time.
approved. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is 6E, the Thunder Store.
This is a request for signage for,
35, Paula.
there it is, for Chesapeake. And when we got into this, currently, they are maxed out. So any signage they request needs to get a variance, which it is before you. Included in your packet this is the existing entrance into the Thunder Shop. And this is there was several wayfinding signs that have been approved in the past. And then here is the current VIP entrance, which is on the back side. You see it from the parking garage for the hotel. So you really can't see this entrance. And as we have in here, they are proposing, get to it, that's the current VIP, and they're proposing, what you're voting on is actually the signage. The rest of these improvements have already been approved with an administrative approval.
Oh, okay.
And if this hadn't needed a variance, this one could have been approved administratively. For the Thunder Shop, there's actually two. Not only do they need it for square footage, but they need it for the height from the sidewalk up to the bottom, because it's required to be 9 feet, and they're going to be lower than that. Mine had indicated it was going to be 8 foot above the sidewalk, which is actually the minimum height for a canopy. So one could say it's going to be acting, it almost kind of looks like a canopy. And we have the drawing with the dimension. It is going to, it'll have a 3D effect. It's not just flat. And what we've indicated in the staff report, as you know from in the past, staff normally does not support variances for signage. However, this building is an extremely large building. There's a lot of activities that go on here, different entrances. People need to know where they are. And if you look at the building, it's a little deceiving because there's a lot more signage on it than you realize when you look at the building, depending on which facade you're looking at. And staff is supporting the request before you.
Okay, great. Tom, do you have anything to add to that?
Tom Anderson, City Manager's Office, on behalf of the applicant. I think Laura outlined the case very well in the circumstances. These are elements that we work very well with the Thunder and with SMG as the management company, and we're consistently looking for ways to improve the customer experience. So with respect to the east entrance, from a management standpoint, it makes this area more identifiable as a placeholder for patrons whose seats are on the club level, on the 200 level, which they have elevators that go directly up there from the east entrance. But it's not readily identifiable as an entrance. So our hope is that it will get greater utilization and take the stress off the main northeast entrance, which gets nearly 2/3 of the patrons that go to an event at the Chesapeake will use that entrance. If we can help diversify those points of ingress and egress, it'll be able to better manage the attendance and the ingress egress from a management standpoint, and it'll also give patrons more readily available access to some of the amenities that are at the building, because we really have a pinch point with like concessions, restrooms, that kind of thing at the main entrance. With respect to the team store, I think initially when we built out the team store, we wanted to put a more identifiable presence and identify that as not only being there during game days, but they're actually open to weekdays from 10 to 6. You can practically walk by the team store today and miss it. So, you know, we've got the window clings and we've got that one little sign above there, and so this sculpted element will make that asset more readily identifiable for people that are looking for the team store.
Great. And we're only voting on this signage. Does the committee have any comments, questions, or motion?
I think it makes a lot of sense. I've actually walked by the store myself and missed it on accident. So with that, I would move to approve the application on the basis that the project complies with the Downtown Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in C and D, with the condition that the applicant obtain a variance from the Board of Adjustment to allow an increase in the allowable signage and the minimum clearance above the sidewalk.
Second.
So that was a Harding, Terrio motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you very much.
And
Provide recommendation of approval to the Board of Adjustment for a variance from the maximum allowable sign area and for the minimum clearance above the sidewalk.
Second. That was Harding Terrio. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? You are approved. Thank you for being here. The next item is 21 North, pardon me, Northwest 7th Street. Is the applicant present?
This is a request for a fence. You might recall when this originally came to you, the fence was removed from the discussion prior to approving the project on 7th Street. This is the container food truck project. They've come back to us. They saw a fence that they liked the look of, which is, I've included in the packet, well, first, this is a view. I got up in the Magnolia Building, which is kind of cool. So you can see they're actually starting to work on the project. They have a couple of the containers set on this one side. This is actually the food truck court site. And I've included, let me get to them, the pictures of the proposed style of fence. They had a rendering, but then these are pictures. The only difference is they don't have the topography that required the step down, so it would be straight across the top. And this is located up at North Broadway and Northwest 16th. Our current sign regulations relative to metal fencing are very specific and doesn't allow this type of sign. It pretty much dictates decorative metal rigid, and the distance between the metal vertical pieces is dictated, and they felt that that was a little too rigid and formal for what they're proposing for their development, and came to us with this, and they need a variance for it because it's currently not allowed at all in our regulations.
Okay. Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I don't really think so. My name's Carly Faulkner. I think another reason why we chose to go with this fence or propose it is because I think we just like that you can see into the development and what's going on. You can see from the street any people walking by or any people driving by. It just allows a nice view of the whole development.
So your supports for the fence are at closer intervals than what is shown in the example. Is that right?
Correct. Let me go back.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments from the committee? Okay.
I would move to approve the application on the basis that the project complies with the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in Section C and D of the staff report, with the condition that A, the applicant receives a variance from the fence design and material regulations.
Good. We've got a motion and a second. That's Bates and Skowthorne. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I also move to provide a recommendation of approval to the Board of Adjustment for a variance from the fence design and material regulations.
Same team. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? You are approved. Congratulations.
We'll see you this
Thanks for
afternoon.
being here. And the next item, 6D.
This item has previously been before you, and it has had several revisions since the last time you've seen it. You might recall at the last meeting, we had an adjacent property owner that came, who owned the building catty corner, and they met with her and made revisions to address concerns they were hearing. So I summarized the revisions in the report, and I'm going to just kind of go over those. So it's actually before you in July, so it's been a while because we've continued it several times. The shipping containers that were originally shown to be used for the accessory structures, which was going to be an outdoor bar and a couple of reviews for restrooms, have been eliminated. And the revised proposal depicts conventional stick frame structures being built. They've also changed the location of some of those slightly, and the structures are, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't get that up. Thank you, Paula. The structures are proposed to be clad in metal. So let me drive down to the view. So They have, as you recall, the Foodies building, get to that, where is that? Has the metal on the outside, and so they're cladding these stick-built buildings with metal to fit in with the Foodies. We have the site plan here. You've got the Foodies building is up in the corner. They still have the addition to the building. They have a bathroom building, which they were proposing before, but now it's not a container. And they have the restroom building and bar and storage at this location. They have a new structure that they're proposing, which is a kind of a screened-in room smoker up in this location. They have reduced the number of seats in this area. That was one concern that we heard discussed by more than one person. They have added the details on the metal entrance gate that we actually talked about, and let me get back to see that. They are leaving the existing door into the building. They originally were proposing to eliminate that, and that is staying. It will not be the entrance into the building. It's not ADA accessible. It currently has a step here, and they're removing that step, but you still get the same feel that the front of the building has not changed. And they're creating the new entrance where they originally were, and they have their fence. I'm trying to get to where we can actually see it, which says Hudson Park, and it's back in this location. And they've kind of changed the layout for the food trucks. They were showing a location for two, but before they were coming in from the alley side, and they were going to be angled. So they're actually eliminating one curb cut that's here, and they're improving one, and that's how the food trucks will go in and out. They have decorative metal fencing meeting our regulations along Hudson and along the street to the north, and it turns the corner, and then it goes to 6-foot wooden fence, or 8-foot.
The buildings are right on the property.
Okay, gotcha, sorry. Okay, got the buildings on the property line, then we have the wooden fence, and we have the dumpster area back here off the alley, and then this is a wooden fence right here. So the staff had only one item in our discussion now. We had several before, as you might recall, and that item is the fact that we have no regulations or guidelines on food truck courts. And so every time we come up with one of these, we have to have this discussion. There were concerns expressed about noise, and their noise ordinance is not one that we enforce. However, what I would say is they've reduced, that our department enforces.
Right.
Okay.
But do you know what the noise ordinance requires?
I don't. I'm sorry, it's managed by the police department, is my understanding. You're asking what's the maximum decibel?
I think this is becoming an important topic, is when do they stop being able to have a certain level of noise outside?
And that's not a regulation that we actually can, and I know that sounds odd, and then I'm going to have a caveat. That's not something that we enforce, so that's not something in my regulations or guidelines. However, what I would say, as I say in the staff report, is they've reduced the number of seats, which one could assume would reduce the potential noise level, as well as by adding the smoker building. It has partial walls and then the screen, and so the solid surfaces that they're proposing there also has the potential to reduce any noise because it could absorb the noise.
Okay.
So
We're
staff is recommending approval of the project.
Okay.
So let me get.
So hi.
Hi.
Can you introduce yourself,
Yes,
please?
my name is Richard Starks. I'm with Prairie Rock Architecture. And we have a presentation for you. I think Laura did a really good job of covering all the changes. We also have a sample of each material that we want to use, so if we want to discuss those later, we can actually pass around a real sample of it.
And this is not to be punitive, but please, I know that we as a group have heard your presentation
Right.
before, so if you could keep it at a minimum amount of time, please.
Okay, let me pull that up for them, which is this. Okay, you're going to drive it, aren't you?
Sure.
Do you want to?
So we're at 1220 North Hudson. We've named it Hudson Park. This is the view looking from the northwest corner. This is the original Foodies building. We are trying to leave that as intact as possible. We're leaving the original sign. This is the new smokehouse. And then looking from the southwest corner, this is where the food trucks, the original building, and then this is the park area. You can see our metal fence, ornamental metal fence wraps the corner and heads back to the south. This is currently a vacant property. And then our buildings are on property line. And then the wood fence doesn't start until south of these buildings in the back.
So is that what it looks like? I mean,
This,
does it look like a fence is attached to it, or is it really doesn't look like that?
let me go to another slide. So this is more of the blow-ups of the building area. This is the entrance. This is the gate that Laura was talking about. This is our ramp up, and then our steps into the site. We have put the original door back in to stay. We did eliminate the steps so that there wasn't confusion on it whether it was entry or not, and then also to make room for our ramp. This is the ground level perspective view from the northwest. And this is a blow-up of the sign in the entrance. So this, the gate in the entrance. It's cut out of metal, Hudson Park, and then we have pickets. And whenever the venue is open, the gate would be open, and then whenever it's closed, this is what you would see. And then this was our main entrance into the existing building. This is a little closer up view of inside the site. This is the area that would be the artificial turf. This is the existing paving. These, to reduce the seating, this is the new planter that we put in. This is what's changed from last time. We still have 3 fire pits. And then the food trucks. And then this is our dumpster enclosure in the back with the wood fence. And then this is the pergolas that we were adding. And so this view is almost like you were sitting on top of the smokehouse roof. Then this is looking, if you were hovering above Hudson, this is another view of the planters and the seating area and food trucks. This is the restroom building. And then we've got our lighting that's suspended. And then this is what we're calling the drink bar building. And then this is a ground level view from inside. This is the planters, our seating, the restroom buildings, the bar building, the smokehouse, the restrooms that are for the existing building, and then you can see the canopy covering over both, extending to cover over both of them. This is a view from underneath the pergola, looking out onto the planters, restrooms, food trucks, the dumpster enclosures behind this fence. And then here's another view. And you can see the smokehouse a little clearer in this one. It's the architectural metal panel below, screen above. And this is a view from the food trucks on the south. And you can see the lighting. And then this is what our client wanted us to recreate with the lighting. And this is the Shake Shack in New York City. So this is an example of what the lighting would look like. So that's kind of the atmosphere we're trying to create.
And
with
I'm
this
going
project.
to show him a picture that addresses the question you asked about the fence behind, because you asked if there was a fence behind those buildings.
No, it's just...
And this rendering looks like there's a fence behind the building, so I wanted to ask.
Right.
for clarification.
So we don't actually have an elevation of the...
So are you saying, do you want the fence or not? Because it's showing in here that it's there.
When we approve it, we approve what we've got, and it
Okay.
looks like it shows, but
It does.
from what you described, it's just a building with siding, and that's something that I think Laura can take care of later.
We can leave it like that.
With the fencing?
With the
or-
fence.
With the fencing? Okay. And
Okay.
okay.
So, do you have some materials you want to
Yes.
pass around? Because we're going to let the committee ask questions, and then we'll ask for people from the audience if anyone wants to speak to this.
So this is an example of our custom metal fascia. You can see the profile. This is what will go around the fascia of the foodies building, the restroom buildings, the bar building, the pergola.
Huh. Will it be bronze or will it be red?
So where are each one of those installed? The difference between the two profiles?
Yeah. So you're talking about the fascia
That's what will wrap around
around,
all of the buildings,
Existing-
smokehouse, everything.
The
Correct.
first one is the fascia, and the second
Correct.
one is the siding of the buildings.
Correct, and that's what you see in the restroom buildings in the back. This was, came up a lot in the last one, what the cover of the pergola was going to be. And this is a transparent material. It lets sun through, but it also, provides shade. But you won't see this unless you're underneath it or in the site. And then this is the turf that we're proposing. It's going to be a site that's open year-round with a lot of traffic, and we felt like this was an appropriate material for that. And it's also going to help with the sound. And the colors for everything were on the board that we passed around first.
So is the pergola just a steel structure with that as kind of an insert?
Correct. It's a hollow metal, it's painted hollow metal, and then we've got the fascia around, and the fascia comes up above the roof material that you see.
Did you provide a material for that smoker house? Did we see it just now?
It's the same metal panel on the
On the
bottom.
bottom, yeah, and what's that infill?
It's screen.
It's just a screen?
Yeah.
Okay, I think it said fiberglass somewhere I saw, but maybe I read it wrong. Maybe fiberglass was for the pergola roof. Okay, so it's just an open screened area.
Right. And the colors that we're passing around, those are the actual color chips. They match what is up here on the board. So these are accent color for the handrails, doors. This is the fascia color, and this is the architectural metal panel color.
Okay. Anything more?
Unless y'all have questions.
Any other questions before we?
Two. So I was not in attendance for the first presentation, so I apologize if I'm asking something that's already been addressed. But the elevations show a removal of the mechanical equipment on top of the existing building. Is there any provisions for reinstallation of mechanical equipment somewhere?
Correct. What we'd have is one plumbing vent, which is PVC pipe. A lot of the other stuff that was up there now is AC units, which we're going away. We're going to do mini splits, so they'll be ductless. That won't be on the roof. And then we'll have a vent for the kitchen, but it's going to be much, much smaller than everything that's up there. It kind of, what's there now dominates, the view of that building.
So as far as what will be on the roof, we're talking 2 vents and anything else?
No.
Okay. I just wanted to know.
And there's no, are these additional structures, the outdoor bar and the restrooms, are those going to have any mechanical equipment?
Yes,
The accessory buildings?
they'll have the ductless mini split as well.
And then my second question regarding the fence on the south side of the site, could you explain the reasoning of switching to a wood fence at that location?
To get the height and to make the dumpster enclosure. And
Solid wood fencing isn't allowed on the street frontages, but you can do it on the non-street, the side and the rear. So it is in keeping with our regulations to have a solid wood fence like that.
And to the south is the alley and the dumpster enclosure, and that's where the main part of the wood fence is.
It jumps out to me as something that contrasts the aesthetic of the overall site, and I appreciated on the northeast corner how the fence wrapped that corner. So I was almost looking for something similar around that southwest corner.
In our original proposal, we did have more wood in there to tie it into the site, but we've removed all of that out of there, and the fence just remained. So, and
Well, it's kind of a detailed question, but the site now is concrete, right?
entire.
So
Yeah,
the
entire
planters that you're going to construct, are those, does that mean you're taking out all the concrete that's below those?
Are the ones in the center? We can take them out, or we're going to have like 18 inches of fill, and so we're not planting anything that gets very large in there. So we're planning on leaving it if we could, but if it's not technically feasible, we can take it out.
If you want your plants to live.
Okay.
That's the key.
Okay. Any other questions? Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to this?
Yes.
Hi there, can you state your name? Write it on a little piece of paper in front of you.
Yes, ma'am. Marva Ellard, 1305 North Hudson Avenue. We own the Seaver property, catty corner to what we call the foodie site. I have handouts.
Okay, thanks.
I want to add two things to the little chart that you have when you get the chart. Cafe do Brasil seats approximately 130 inside, and their patio is 38, and Waffle Champion seats approximately 80, and their patio is 37. So those are not on the typed chart. Those were two that I noticed today that I hadn't put on there. So I want to tell you right up front that I think Joe Youngman is a good guy. His team has been accessible. Joe's been accessible. He's a successful restaurant operator. He's shown great dedication to Paseo, and I think he would show the same to Midtown. They've worked with us and met several times, but there are still 3 issues that I have, and that's what I'd like to talk about. The main one is the size of the outdoor space. And from that size comes a lot of concerns about noise. If you can see from my little chart I made you, all the patios on Walker, and I know a lot of you all drive Walker on a regular basis, are relatively small. I think the biggest one may be Louis, and it's 40. Most of them are between 30 and 40. And these are some of the most successful restaurants in Midtown. And Joe's proposing 180. And if you combine that with his inside seating, that's around 215. I just really don't ever see 215 people eating barbecue at the same time. And that is a lot of noise. I bought a decibel meter and started reading the noise ordinance, and to answer some of Mrs. Brunstetter's questions, after 10 o'clock is when the decibel level drops down from 60 to 55. So I was out the other night at 1 o'clock driving around learning to use this thing, and Blue Garden, Fassler Hall, and the pump were all incredibly loud, probably in the 60s and 70s, and that was 1 o'clock in the morning. And they all have a large number of people. They're large establishments, so there's a lot of people. And if the outdoor space was smaller, it seems that the ability to be loud would be drastically decreased. You know, this is a part of the neighborhood that is heavily residential. There's us, there's the Claremont, there's Wesley Village, there's Palo Duro, there's 430, there's 1212, there's the Florence, there's a lot of other small buildings, and I'm not even including the Edge. I'm just talking about things that are within a block of this site. So there are people that live here and have to get up and go to work in the morning. And so noise is something that is probably at the top of my list on how this is going to impact our area. And I've read your ordinance probably more than I ever needed to, but it does talk about the ordinance should be construed for the specific site. And you all probably know this. I probably don't need to quote this, but this is not an open part of the neighborhood. It's relatively developed as compared to other areas, and it said that the Downtown Design Review Committee and staff shall consider these guidelines as appropriate to the specific site and district. So I think this site warrants a smaller development, outdoor development. And as you can see from some of the pictures, one of my other concerns is the way the project addresses Hudson with the 6-foot fence. All the restaurants that have patios on Walker have fences this tall. So you can see your friends and your neighbors when you drive down the street or walk down the street, and it makes you want to go in and see what's going on, and it's much friendlier and it's much more accessible. And the 6-foot fence seems very foreboding to me, and it seems like there should be a way to push that back some and make it lower and put some street trees in, and it just could be more inviting from the Hudson side. And that's the side that most of us are going to see on a regular basis, is that side. I do think the restaurant will be an amenity to the area, but I'm very concerned about the size of the outdoor space and how it addresses Hudson.
Okay, thank you very much. Is the applicant still here? Yes. Oh. So, Marvin brought up some good questions. I think the question I would ask is, why didn't you go with a little bit more of a non-site proof fence to engage the street? If you hang around here, you know I really believe in engaging the street, the pedestrians.
So with outdoor eating comes something else that we haven't talked about, and that is there's trash, and we wanted to keep that from blowing around. Also, the fence we're talking about has half-inch pickets on 4-inch centers. You can see right through it. It's what's allowed. We're very regulated.
And I'll clarify that. Our current regulations require 1-inch pickets, and if it's over 4 foot tall, it has to have 6-inch centers. So unless they get a variant, this will have a much wider
6-inch
picket, so
center.
it'll have below 4 foot. It can be as close as 2.5-inch pickets, but it can't be right next to each other being site proof. So especially taller than 4 foot, because 6 inches is much more open than you typically see on a decorative metal fence.
Does seem like.
Standard is 4 inches, but our code is real specific.
Right.
So, as far as trash is concerned, it's going to blow right through that thing.
Hopefully not. And there's a double-edged sword here with noise and sight. They're two opposing things you're trying to accomplish. You're either putting up a barrier and blocking the sound, but you also want to let people see in to see what's going on inside to invite them in. So what level of that, where we end up is, what's in the regulations.
Seems like then the idea of adding some landscaping would be helpful. I know Connie would go for that. Danielle?
Well, I was just, I don't see that necessarily lowering the fence from 6 feet to anything lower is going to impact sound at all. I certainly don't see it being a trash barrier and being a purpose, so I think that might be a good compromise. I kind of agree. It certainly looks like a barrier in the renderings, at least, and yeah, I think that it was probably worthwhile looking at maybe, creating less of a barrier. I guess I can understand you may be trying to control access, into the patio area. But other than that, I guess I don't understand.
Their original fence, if you can kind of think back, they had two, and one of them was X'd out because they originally had proposed wood on the street frontages, and we said, no, you couldn't design it the way they were proposing it. So they came up with a fence that meets our regulations, which is what they're showing.
And then on the noise side of things, I'd like the owner to talk about hours of operation, because some of y'all may not have heard that in the last
That'd be
presentation.
great. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Joe Youngman. The other thing on the fence that we looked at is across from us where Marva has her parking, it matches her fence, so we thought we would have the look of our building and our fence line sort of very similar to what she already had. So that was one of the big reasons of that fence being what it is. I just wanted a fence there. Plus, I don't want people who are drinking to walk over the fence, and then I'm in violation, so there's a way to try to keep people in. And in that area, it's very, very open, so part of how I actually went out to the pump the other day, and they have a lower fence, and here we go with people just jumping over the fence to go to their cars. Well, if they have a beer in their hand, then I'm in violation, or if they have anything in that aspect. So that's why we looked at the taller fence, because of the aesthetics of it, how her fence looked, and then we just thought we'd match that. That was the big point of it. Noise factor, hours of operations, we bounced them around a little bit, but I have, if the decibels are high, I've worked with a lot of people in one of my other locations to where in the beginning we took over an existing building and they had music playing all the time, so we were in violation but learning as we went along. Well, we also learned to work with the neighbors around of saying, okay, if this is disrupting anybody, we'll drop it down. And we've worked with this for years, finally figured out the solution, and now we have a solution for it so we don't play music past 10 o'clock in that location. Noise factor, same kind of thing. We'll shut down operations on food. Typically, restaurant operations should be at 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock on the weekends. That's the thought process. But if we run into a situation where all of a sudden we're in violation of the decibels, we'll adjust. We'll help out and work with the people. I've been in the city over 20 years now, and my goal is to get along with people and just want to add some more restaurants in. So that's where I look at this going, we'll know right away if we're in violation. The police will come out. They'll let us know we're in violation. And it's not my goal to be in violation.
I appreciate your offering that kind of ability to work with the neighbors. However, the design is still up to us to approve. And I would feel like you would benefit if you had a 4 or a 4.5 foot fence instead of a 6 foot fence. And
well, we can definitely look at that. It's just we're trying to get this project to where we can move it forward, and so that's why we're happy talking to people, getting things going. That discussion on the fence never came up until just now. It's the first time I've heard of it.
Okay.
Otherwise, we probably would have had that fixed also.
Okay.
Okay?
Any other questions?
I'll just chime in on the fence for good measure. I don't have a problem with what's being proposed as far as the height. Looking at the image across the street, even though it is the top rails at 6 feet, the fence that's being proposed will visually be quite open. And looking at similar projects like Blue Garden, that fence is at least 6 feet, if not higher, right on the sidewalk, probably 50% more dense than what's being proposed, and you still do engage with the people that are there. So, my 2 cents.
Thank you. Anything else? Do we have any other? Oh, Ms. Jenkins, would you like to come forward and have a word?
Hi, my name's Jane Jenkins. I'm the president of Downtown Oklahoma City Incorporated, and I serve as the principal staff person for the Midtown Association. That board met this week. We did discuss this project. I believe that the concerns that Marva articulated are some of the concerns that are shared by the board of directors. In regard to the size of the fence, I think that they all agree that the property should engage with the street more. Another concern is parking. I realize that this project does not have to provide parking, and I understand that the principals or owners are trying to work with some surrounding folks to provide for that parking, but there is concern from some businesses that surround there that do provide parking that they will have to gate their parking lots, because right now there's a capacity where they can kind of share it and it kind of works out, but with this kind of capacity coming in of a 200-seat facility that does not have to provide dedicated parking, there is a concern from some of the owners. I know that's not part of what you're there, but I wanted to sort of let you know that that's there. And Blue Garden has always been and promoted or sold to the neighborhood as a placeholding type of use for that property, because there's other uses that are there for the future. So I don't know that it's a good comparison, and maybe this is a placeholding type use also. So what is there? But I know that residents that live catty-cornered from Blue Garden have expressed some concerns about the noise, from there. Also, the residents at the Sieber, while they will be customers of this, they probably are not going to be 1 a.m. customers of such a business. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments from the gallery, please?
Sorry.
You're fine. Appreciate it.
Hi, my name is Steve Mason. I live at 824 Northwest 8th and have redeveloped numerous old buildings around town. I share Jane's concerns about parking, and I appreciate the applicant saying they want to be neighborly about the sound, and I think they need to be neighborly about where the 200 people are going to park. Thank you.
Are there any other comments from the gallery?
We are working with the law firm right next door to us, which is north of the location, we are in talks with them to see how we can finalize everything for parking. Again, we realized that when we went to that area that parking was not a requirement, but we also want to look at seeing if we can help out with maybe working an agreement to use somebody's parking facility when they're not in operation. And we believe we have about 65 slots just to the north of us that we're going to figure out how to put a lease together with them so we can use their parking. That's the one aspect. The other side, that we know this site is at one point going to become something, so that issue is going to come up to the city anyway at one point, is the parking. So if it's not us doing something, it'll be somebody at one point, is what I also see, because I see all the development happening down there. So I'm hoping the city also helps address some of those aspects for the people coming downtown or to Midtown.
Would you be willing to have us entertain putting the fence off and working on the rest of the layout, if we could come to an agreement on that?
Sure.
Okay.
I have a question. Can you remind me what's in that vacant lot right next this?
Right next door to it on the, what is the east side of it is just...
Is it paved or what?
It's dirt.
Let me get it.
Okay. And would that be something, is that part of your parking
It's
plan?
not,
or-
it's not. It's a whole different building. We think it's been leased already. We looked at leasing that piece also, but he's asking a lot.
I'm just trying to think if that could be part of a parking solution, if there's a conversation there that you're working on.
I guess it's kind of a two-edged sword, because it would have to be paved to be used for parking, and you add hard surface, and that actually, as you know, things bounce off of hard surfaces. And
Okay, I have been reminded that our issues are design and not zoning and parking and noise, even though we are concerned about those things. So, do we have any other, is there anyone else from the audience that would like to speak to this?
I just have one more thing.
Okay.
So hopefully, if the fence is open and we're able to see into the food truck park, I have a question about the planters again, and I want to get Connie's opinion on the planters, because especially if there's if the concrete isn't removed, I suspect these things are going to be big bathtubs when it rains, and it doesn't sound like they're really going to work. And even if you do remove the concrete, I wonder, do they need to be drained somehow for anything to survive in them?
It kind of depends on what's underneath it, but they definitely have to have all of that concrete removed underneath the planters. And there's no real explanation as to what they were made out of, or they have to have a footing.
We would dowel into the existing paving, and then they'd be cast-in-place concrete with a capstone on them. And then, I mean, we'll have weep holes and drains. The property slopes from the north is the highest, the south is the lower elevation, and they would drain to the south, and it would drain through weep holes.
No, you've got to remove the concrete below.
Well, yeah, we'll do that. We can do that too.
Okay.
But you still make the bathtub like she was talking about, so you still have to have the weep holes in there.
You know, the other thing, you've said that you put those planters in there to reduce seating, and yet you built them at seating height, so you've actually increased seating. We do that all the time. We build our planters at 18 inches tall so people can sit on the sides of them.
So there's another thing with the seating count that's come in. Our max occupancy on that building with one entrance is 49 in the existing building. And with having the door put back in, that's even lowered it down to, around 44. So that's our max occupancy by code of that building, the existing building. And then we provided, fixed chair seating for 100 people. That's what the seat count is. Then there's other circulation space where people will be standing, playing games, just hanging out. And then there are all the walls. But they're raised up so we don't have access to the area that's on top. And if somebody sits on the wall, it's not really any different than someone standing in that space. So, and then the staff report, they list 180 as the occupancy, so it's under 200. When we were talking originally, if you just do standing space, we were in the 400 or 500s. If you just pack that with people standing as far as your code allowable occupancy.
And this is a restaurant, not a bar.
Correct. That's
It does kind of change the
correct. And they have to have over 50% sales other than alcohol, and that's in the staff report also. That's part of the regulations.
Okay. Anyone else from, okay.
I'm sorry, I'll just add to it. Years ago, not even years ago, just recently I went to Austin, Texas, and I fell in love with Franklin's Barbecue. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that out there, but it's a very incredible little location, and that's sort of what I'm looking to put there. Original, when we first put this project together, that the food side wasn't even an aspect that we wanted to deal with. We wanted to put food trucks out there and just have random people come in. But now, after meeting with you all, after talking with Marva, after looking at different options, I wanted to model it more after a Franklin's Barbecue or something to that aspect. And I don't know if y'all are familiar with that, if you've ever been, but it's a pretty neat operation. And that's why the smokehouse came in. So we've changed the whole dynamics of what we thought we were going to do into putting this into a restaurant mode.
Okay, we appreciate that. Do we have any other questions?
I have one question, and I'll ask Danielle. I think of this part of Oklahoma City as charming with shade trees and brick old buildings. And architecturally, how do these buildings, these stick buildings that they're going to add, fit in?
Well, I think I commented maybe on the last meeting, but in my opinion, the existing building that's there, I appreciate the preservation. I think it actually has a little piece of unique character on the corner, and I think that the additional buildings are kind of playing off of that language of that existing building. So when I see that and I see these new structures, I think it's going to fit in on that site and probably in the urban fabric. And then, to add to that, they're all pulled back off the street frontage. So I don't think the buildings themselves will have a large presence, and they're also very small. So I think it's okay.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I would move to approve the application on the basis that the project complies with the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in section C and D of the staff report.
Is that pulling out, I know for you it may not be pulling out the fence.
With the condition that the fence design come back for review.
And can I clarify, you're talking the metal and the wood fence design, the whole
Yes.
fencing?
Yes, because the inclusion of the fence on the east side, I think, is worth discussing more as well when that comes back.
Second.
That's a Bates, Terrio motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Anything else on that one? No? Okay. Moving right along. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry. We need to continue the fence to a specific date.
Oh, excuse me, I forgot that. I'll
Okay.
get in touch with them.
You want to make a motion for that?
I move to hear the review of the fence design at the November meeting.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, that's Bates, Terrio. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Yay. Okay, now we're moving right along. This is 1000 North Broadway Avenue. Is the applicant present? Looks like the applicant is present.
So we have an addition that is being proposed to the
Laura? Or Paula, one, is there any way that I could get you to put something on, I didn't get here early enough.
That's okay.
So this is for an addition to the Community Foundation's building on Broadway. In the staff report, there was one item that was discussed. This is Lisa's report, and unfortunately, she's out of town. And that is the amount of glass that's being proposed for the building. We don't specify they can't have this much glass, but we typically don't get this much glass. As she pointed out in the report, it allows for the building to kind of stand on its own. And in a downtown area, you have, as you know, buildings butted up next to each other. So one could argue, well, they should have continued the design that was originally done, but then you would have had, it would have been a block long, and some might feel it needed an update, because it's been a while since they built that. So we felt that it was totally appropriate, and it did address the guidelines. And let me just ask a quick question. There is one revision to what you had in your packet, and this came up after the packet went out. When you look in your packet at the elevations, you will see on the Broadway side that there were some detailing that was added on the top part of the windows.
Right.
Those are being removed, and
Okay.
I believe what you're going to see is elevations with those removed, correct? So,
Yes.
so that is what he's, there was a big discussion, and and it wasn't just on the part of the applicant, there was some input from some people on the outside about removing those. So I just wanted to bring that up. Staff has no problem with removing those from the project.
Okay, great.
Thank you. My name is David Hornbeek. I'm with Hornbeek Blatt Architects. Thank you. First, this is a new building addition proposed not to an existing historic structure, but to a building that's been constructed within the last 10 years. The materials that we propose are brick, cast stone, and glass with metal awnings on the west and south side, and there's architectural metal panels that will be on the east side. The addition fully addresses both streets by coming out to the property line, and we purposely designed the addition so as not to match the existing building. We believe the change in the building vernacular provides more diversity to the block and effectively keeps the side of the street from being one entire block-long building. The building does not exceed height regulations or restrictions, and the addition as designed incorporates a storefront facade on both the west and the south side that's intended to relate to the pedestrians as they walk by. Is this will this advance it? Okay, that'll work. Yeah, it advanced, I saw it. Yeah, it is. So, I don't know if you can, do you have a screen in front of you guys? Can you see what we're doing?
Yes, David, we are looking at your work, right, even though we're looking down.
Okay, no, thank you.
Okay.
As you can see, the existing building on the north end was originally designed with a cast stone in an elliptical arc. And when we looked at trying to do something on this building, we wanted to take what was at the north and also emulate that and use that as a design motif on the south. So when we did, okay, in the area that is highlighted in pink, this area right here, what we did was we took we purposely on the original building set that part of the building back so that that entire facade would not be as long as it could be. And there are pilasters that actually stick out from that part of the building, and the windows are recessed somewhere between 20 and 24 inches behind those pilasters. We took that. What am I doing wrong? I am so sorry.
Hey, maybe we should have Paula or...
Could you just stand there?
Paula will... Okay.
Okay, click it one more time. We took that and we put it down, and that is the exact same size and pattern that we used to create the west cast stone element. Click it one more time. Then we took, if you can see the window patterns that are in that same element, please click it one more time. And those are the same window patterns that occur in between the cast stone. Thank you. We can stop right there. All right.
Are you sure?
Am I sure?
Are you sure you want her to go away?
Oh, well, we can stop right now. We're not going to go any further.
I'm right here.
The window patterns on the south and the west windows follow the same size, order, and rhythm of the pattern of the existing building. This proposed addition is an example of the following statements in the Automobile Guidelines for the Next Century under Guidelines for New Construction, which, by the way, is 7 pages long from page 31 through page 37. New construction should fill the entire building line at the side of the corner lots. The goal is to complement the existing materials, but not to create a reproduction building. Primary building shape is rectangular, both in plan and elevation. Vertical, and this is tricky, but this is exactly what it says, vertical emphasis, secondary emphasis, but particularly on corners. New construction should express some type of rhythm in the openings of its structure, and new construction should respect the abundance of rectangular openings, but should not be limited to them. This proposed addition meets the guidelines for new construction and meets all 8 of the plan goals on page 3 of the automobile guidelines. Most importantly, the last 2, number 7 and 8. Number 7, strive to improve the area's desirability as a location for new and expanding businesses. Number 8, promote Automobile Alley to encourage new jobs and reinvestment along Automobile Alley. When the Community Foundation decided to build on this vacant lot 10 years ago, there was no vitality at the north end of Automobile Alley. Neighbors Coffee was the only place to go to get something to eat. Since the Oklahoma City Community Foundation's announcement and completion of their facility, 2 bicycle shops, numerous retail stores, a liquor store, a wine store, a cupcake shop, and at least 7 restaurants have been established. And that doesn't include Hudson's, which is, I think, 1 block further west, but not technically in Automobile Alley. The fact that the desirability as a location for businesses and the encouragement to create new jobs and the investment that's put into Automobile Alley is absolutely due to the facility that has already been created and constructed by the Oklahoma City Community Foundation. This addition will do nothing but reinforce those same goals. The last thing I'd like for you to consider when we do this is on the first page of the new construction guidelines, the very first paragraph, I want to quote this. Great care should be taken to design any new building to reflect today's design philosophies. New buildings should not be constructed to mimic what has been built in the past. They should be complementary to the materials used in old buildings, but they should look like a product of our times, not past times. These new buildings should be recognizable as something from the late 20th or early 21st century, not 1900. We ask that you pass our proposed design.
Nice presentation, David. Any questions from the committee? I'm going to lead out with this. You might want to, David, you might want to stay up here. I really applaud the Oklahoma City Community Foundation for building, and I like the siting of this building. I think it provides some public space as well as really engaging the street. And you know, that was a big discussion that we had, 10 years ago or whenever, was the engagement of the pedestrians on the street. I think you guys really get that. I am just not crazy about how this meets the ordinance as far as kind of blending in with or addressing the surroundings. And I think I'm going to let everybody else speak, but I think I've pinpointed why I think that. So.
Well, I'd like to hear it.
Well, I'm going to let other people speak, and then if it's not brought up, I'll mention that.
Can you remind me again what material is kind of, it looks maybe like a limestone or some kind of, maybe it's concrete that's on the backside?
That, on the backside, that is an architectural metal panel.
Oh, that's metal panel.
We've got it cantilevered out over the sidewalk.
Oh, and you had that in this other exhibit here. Okay. I think I view this favorably, I guess, is one way to say it. I appreciate its proximity, or fronting the sidewalk as it does, and I appreciate it looking like a different structure, even though it's an extension of the existing one. But I also see how you tied in some of the scaling and some of the balance of the rest of the structure. And so I guess I just have positive feedback for what it's worth in terms of its look. I like the kind of the glass facing of it. It seems to kind of open up or welcome that side of it as well. Besides that one question, that's all I had.
Two questions on the west facade. Everything shown in beige would be cast stone. Is that
Yes, sir.
correct? And then, I'm sorry, I stepped out for a second. I might have missed this. The ornamental pieces within that arcade, are those still included?
They are not.
They're not. They've been removed as shown in the elevations that you presented. They were not shown in
That's correct.
And then, last question, I just want to make sure I'm seeing this right. There are two-story glass fins proud of the curtain wall at that southwest corner?
That's correct.
Okay. That's all the questions that I have.
Where are the two fins?
We want to put shade frits on those to help try to control the sun on that west corner.
Okay.
For taking questions, Bill, the only question I had was the canopies. I think in the materials, I remember seeing there was a prefabricated canopy being proposed somewhere on the building, and I wasn't sure if it was for this kind of continuous gray band that I'm seeing, if that was
That's
made.
correct, ma'am.
So, okay. So I'm not sure. My understanding of those canopies is they come in certain lengths. I don't know. The depiction of what it looks like here doesn't match my imagination of what those really look like in actuality. So I believe they're made in certain prefabricated lengths, and you're planning on meshing them together to make a continuous canopy.
Well, this will be a custom-made canopy. This will not
Okay.
be an
It's not
off-the-rack one.
plain
If you buy one off the rack, yes, ma'am, they come in standard sizes, but we'll build this one specifically for this building.
I understand. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions?
Well, I think it looks great. I think I'm starting to think I don't know anything about architecture. I think this matches perfectly with the building next door, and it would be a benefit to the neighborhood.
So I do appreciate a lot of the aspects of the project that have already been discussed as far as siting the building at the sidewalk. I appreciate the scale of the building, the use of brick. I'm slightly thrown off by two sides of this equation where it seems like the original concept or intent was to design this building not as an addition to the existing building. So I'm surprised to see so many decisions being made for this building that are either inspired or pulled from the existing building. There's a lot of the existing building in this proposed addition. So if it's intended not to be an addition to this building, I think those lines are being very much blurred. And then once those decisions have been made, it seems like the architectural decisions that were made to then distinguish it as something different are decisions that do very much contrast what's currently established in Automobile Alley. The element of this design that gives me the greatest concern is the southwest corner. And I understand the expression of the three-story curtain wall with the cast stone element placed inside of that. I understand that, but as soon as that glass turns the corner, and in addition includes vertical glass fins, it's a completely different language that's going on as far as the character of the building in relation to the context. And that expression of that glass corner, it doesn't match anything that's in Automobile Alley currently, and it doesn't speak to the existing building as well. So it seems like a very arbitrary element within the design. So my biggest hang-up really is that southwest corner. And I could see, again, I understand the expression of the three-story curtain wall. If there was something there to interrupt it at the corner and not have that glass turn the corner, I think that would play more favorable to fitting within the context of the neighborhood.
Is everybody done? Will I get a chance to speak to that?
So I'll speak up about my concern about especially the Broadway facade, which is really what we want to continue the discussion that the buildings have along Broadway, and this is such an important. Such an important building. I can't express this enough, because hopefully in the near future we're going to be seeing a lot of other projects filling those missing teeth along Broadway. And you've got a lot of responsibility, David, with this building. And you did a great job on the original building. But the cast stone colonnade element on the front of that building just jumps out at me as being not working with any of the other elements going on in Broadway. Removing the little tablatures was a good move. I appreciate that, and I'm glad that we have an elevation in our packet that shows that. But I would almost prefer to see a glass box out there than to see that little entablature. And you do have cast stone, or the replica of cast stone on the front of the Oklahoma City Community Foundation building, but it's really not visible from this location, this end of the block. So I'm just going to throw that out there.
Okay. I want to try to do this in somewhat of an order, but could we go now back to my PDF where we stopped? That one? Yes, ma'am. Advance it 6 or 7. It should be a black screen. Okay. Before you advance any further, first off, it was always intended to be an addition. I don't know. You said this was not intended to be an addition. Of course it's an addition. What we've tried to do was make it appear to look like a different building. But it's important that the floors line up, and it's important that it's even important for us that the grid be the same, so that we can keep the same office sizes and continuity that's in the existing building in this building. So that's one of the reasons why we took the spacing that we did, because that's based on the same grid spacing that we already have, and the new offices that will be created will not be any larger or any smaller than anybody else's offices.
And I understand that from a structural standpoint and a modular standpoint, but the way that the proportions of the facade have been delineated and broken down are taken exactly from the existing building. So from an appearance standpoint, you're building a lot of continuity in the appearance of the facade from the existing to the new. And I just referenced the scope of work that's in our packet, and it says the new addition has been designed so that, in capital, not to be an extension of the existing vernacular. of the building, of the
That's
existing.
correct, vernacular.
Right, so there's modules and lines and datums in the vernacular of the existing building that have been transferred over to this proposal as well. I would argue that the vernacular has actually, in your elevations, you've highlighted the vernacular of the existing building and how that's been duplicated in the addition. Now, I'm not trying to make a point on whether or not it needs to match the existing building or not. I'm just trying to understand the intent of what's been proposed.
Okay, it's my understanding that the automobile alley guidelines are just that, guidelines, they're not ordinances. But the DDRC ordinance on page 17 under item 4, that's development pattern, it says new development should incorporate the approximate scale and proportions of the block pattern, concentrating mass and height at key intersections along the major corridors. We took our block and we approximately made the same kind of scale. That's right out of your ordinance. Tell me where we went wrong.
So I've already talked about at least the one aspect that is the main holdup for me, that southwest corner. And I'm not saying that it's right or wrong. I'm just trying to understand if the intent was not to make it appear like an extension of the existing building. I don't know that that's been achieved.
When we originally designed the first building, we did the area around the plaza at the north end in kind of an homage to the Daily Oklahoman building. And if you look at even some of the metal detail in the openings, that was a mimic of some of that work. What I'd like to discuss now is what is a 21st century building? Would you push it one more time? I went around town looking at the last 4 multi-story buildings that have been built, the most recently. This one is in the Med Center. This one has a glass corner, and it has a little bit of cast stone in front of it on one portion. Would you advance it again? Same building, southwest corner. This is how they treated the southwest corner. One more. Back in the Med Center, this is the southwest corner of a new addition to Children's Hospital. One more time. This is probably the newest building in Oklahoma City, and it's certainly a 21st century building. Those are 2 corners that are on the southwest wrapped in glass. One more time. And then this is the Devon building, and every 90-degree corner in the Devon building is a corner that's wrapped in glass. You can see the structure behind it, but they've wrapped glass and they've done that. I believe the guideline says it's supposed to look like a building from the 21st century, not a building from the 1900s. And if you express that corner with brick, you are at least mimicking, which the guideline said you're not supposed to mimic. So if we want to get into semantics, the definite, I mean, it doesn't say copy, because copy, we all know what that would be. It would be to replicate it or duplicate it exactly, but the definition of mimic is to resemble closely, imitate playfully, or mock or impersonate. Your guidelines say we're not supposed to mimic a 1900 building. We're supposed to design to the 21st century, folks, and then we did. This is subjective. And I want to say this, if you guys vote not to accept this, I want you to tell me where we failed in following the guidelines.
Okay. So, any other questions or comments from the committee? I'm going to open this up to the audience. Is there anyone that would like, Mr. Mason, would you like to come forward?
Sure. Hi, I'm Steve Mason. I live at 824 Northwest 8th, and I've actually redeveloped 10 of the adjoining buildings that David spoke to. I actually had the pleasure of serving on the Community Foundation Board when we did the first building. and served on the properties task force that worked with David on the design, and very proud of it. And, you know, David's comments are right. You know, that part of town was pretty dead, and it sure helps spark what we've seen happen up there. And it's a wonderful addition, and the Community Foundation is a wonderful entity within our city. I also serve on the Allenville Alley Board, so I want to give you some of our perspective. And my comments haven't been sanctioned by the board, but I probably speak to some of our sentiment. At times, we've been criticized for not being engaged fast enough in the processes that have come before you all. Our board was aware a design was being prepared, but the first knowledge we had of the design, the first time we saw a picture of it, was the day after the application was filed with the city and the picture was in the paper. So we spent a lot of time trying to play catch-up because we don't know anything about these projects until they hit the paper. And any encouragement you could give to applicants, maybe to talk to us earlier, I think would make everybody's life easier. I mean, we want to help, we want to participate, but it's kind of tough to catch up when the picture's in the paper. So anything you could do there would be helpful.
We understand that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Totally.
You know, speaking to the aesthetics, I'm very good at remodeling buildings and finding tenants, but I'm kind of aesthetically challenged. Sometimes I don't dress perfectly. So I have to rely on people more talented than me, which is you guys, to figure out, does this building meet the character of the district? Is it complementary? Realizing, you know, it has to be current. And, you know, certainly to me, not knowing much, there's a lot of glass there, and I'll leave it to you guys to figure out about the glass and stuff. Thank you.
Okay. Any other speakers?
Good afternoon. My name is Rand Elliott. I am here representing the Automobile Alley Historic District Design Committee. We've had the pleasure of meeting with the Oklahoma City Community Foundation on 2 occasions here recently to talk about their proposed project. And clearly we have some concerns. We feel in particular that this is a suburban building being placed in an urban setting. In an effort to be helpful in this process, because it's so hard to communicate the National Park Service guidelines to people that don't deal with it every day, we felt like that the best solution was actually to create an educational or come from an educational point of view about how you might go about doing this. And so what we've done are 2 things. One was that we literally took the guidelines that we understood for this project and have put together a series of images that we believe are representative of how you would arrive at a solution that would be putting a modern building into a historic district. And so we're going to do that, share that with you today. The key, as you know, in a historic district is dealing with the scale, the proportion, the context, not just the block that you're working on, but those things that are within and around the particular area. That's very important. So all the things that you're going to see here today are representative of things that the National Park Service and the Secretary of Interior Standards relates to as new buildings being inserted into historic districts. And I would just tell you that as a group, the intention is not to design a project for them. That's never the point. But it is our responsibility, we feel like, to provide some direction and acceptable solutions in an effort to provide guidelines, since the process is so challenging from that standpoint. I'd like to start. Will you drive it for me? Oh, I'm sorry, I do. Ha. Do that if you don't have it, do you? My apologies. What I've chosen to do today is to put this into context. And the first dozen images are what Automobile Alley is like as a neighborhood. And it's impossible to understand that until you actually see it in front of you. So if you'll indulge me just a moment, this will give you a real sense in a very short and quick review of what the Automobile Alley character is about. So we're obviously starting at 4th Street. You see the original Oklahoma building, the Buick building, and the Markham building in the order as it begins in the neighborhood. And of course, lots of great cast stone. The things that I want you to particularly notice is the rhythm of the windows, the fact that the majority of them are punched windows, and that this is an example of cast stone being used in the neighborhood. Next. The other thing I'd like to propose to you based on the idea that's being presented is that buildings along Automobile Alley had a front, they had a side, they have a back, and the front is the face of the building, and always was, because these are typically narrow fronts and deep buildings as far as the construction. You'll notice the red brick building above, that's actually the north elevation of Red Prime, or the Buick building. And what it represents is how buildings were built at that time, and in terms of a way to be referential to that. And it was basically a concrete structure with brick infill. The brick was called a common brick. It was an inexpensive thing, and the money was actually put into the face. But what's important is what this implication might mean to other projects. Next. Continuing on down Broadway, you get a nice sense of, again, punched openings, horizontal qualities, and the scale of the windows. Next. The original C.R. Anthony building, even though this has been altered pretty dramatically, there still is a punched window and a horizontal element that is consistent with the neighborhood. Next. And so you're beginning to really see the consistency. You see horizontal window, you see simple entablatures, you see in the industrial aesthetic of Automobile Alley. Next. Same thing, canopies are consistent, punched openings, the horizontal nature of it, the scale and the proportion make these really beautiful buildings. Next. 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 And I'm going to stop here just for a moment and again just point out what's the context here. The context is not a single building. The context is about those things that are around you in your neighborhood. And that's an important part of the inspiration on how you do a modern building inserted into a historic district. Next. Nice photo of the existing building. Next. Elevation from the, in essence, the street side, or the east side of the building. Next. So this begins the illustration of one idea about how something can be done. This is not intended to be a solution. It's not intended to be an architectural statement. This is a guideline or a reference on how you would do this. And so the image can't be contained by just the site where we're talking about, but it has to be expanded. And so this image, albeit small, shows you the relationship of the adjacent buildings so that you begin to get a sense of context. And so this concept is really intending to show the datum lines or the consistency between the existing building on the left and the proposed corner building in the middle. You see the datum lines, meaning sill lines and window heads, the rhythm of the punched openings, and then the desire to have a glass corner. And so that is represented here. If you go across the street, you see the context of what's really here. And when you see that, you begin to see the punched openings, you see the sill heights, you see the windows, all of the things that make the context of Automobile Alley appropriate. So what's intended to be represented here is the notion on the right that the filigree on the parapet would be non-existent in a new building, because this is a building built in the 21st century that is intended to be consistent with a historic district. And so the representations of the canopies, the proportion and scale is representative of a new idea. Next. I just basically did a version where you show more of the windows being visible with the sun coming from a different position. Next. You turn the corner, and the idea is that the corner glass, which was a desired element as we understand it, is consistent here. You see that. You see a connection turning the corner. It provides a very new approach architecturally to the neighborhood, but yet it is consistent. Next. This is the south elevation as you're coming around the corner. Corner buildings always had a front and a side, or two fronts, if you will. In this particular instance, because it's a corner, and it's a very important thing to maintain that point of view. Next. Another version, I mean, how can you vary or add a new building in a historic district? One would be match the brick, make the brick darker, provide other alternatives for materials that are consistent with the neighborhood as well. And so this represents the idea that you can actually do a darker brick that differentiates it from others. Next. You can see that the vertical element has a different tone of color compared to the body of the building. Next. We also suggested another idea, which might be to add a cast stone corner. This is consistent with the references to the Oklahoman building and other buildings in the area that have this kind of verticality, if you will. And it, too, shows it as a separate and new entity within the framework of the neighborhood. Next. It could continue around the corner. Next. And then it could also be consistent that you could do an all-cast stone building. Is it different? Yes. Is it consistent with the neighborhood? Yes, it is, because it begins to maintain the proportion and scale of the existing conditions within the neighborhood, but yet changes the material. Next. If you were to drive down Broadway and we're trying to differentiate between what was existing 1900s buildings and what's new, I think this would be clear. Very clear in terms of what goes on. And that's the key with doing modern insertions in historic districts. Next. Next. We went on to represent how the back of the building, if you will, might be done. And so this is an example of using the concrete frame, simple brick infill. You'll notice that the windows that went around the corner on the left, 2 bays, are larger in scale because they match those things on the south elevation. Then at the second grid going to the right, it's a smaller scale that matches or continues the rhythm of the original building. And in terms of David's comment about setback, I'm very sensitive to that, and I understand weight and so forth. And the next image, I think, represents an alternative. Next. So there it is in one position, do another one. So you might actually, one more, you might actually set it back to be able to handle the construction of the cantilever, if you will. So I think the whole point here is simply a diagrammatic representation that corner buildings should have 2 fronts, the primary facade, which is Broadway, the secondary facade, which is Knight, and that in fact you could do something that suggests that there was a back to a building, even though it's done in a very new way. Next. I happened to be in Chicago within the last couple of weeks and was visiting Mies van der Rohe's Federal Plaza. If you've not been there, you should go. But I noticed this and thought this was a stunning example of the ability to add a modern building alongside a historic building. And if you look at this, you think, well, that's interesting, isn't it? But yet there is what Vitruvius would call firmness, commodity, and delight. There's a connection here. And you look at this and you think, what is that connection? And the connection is simply the proportion, the scale of the historic windows really do meet and are combined in a modern setting in the right building. And so if the Community Foundation wanted to take it a step further and do something really fabulous, as Betsy is suggesting, that you really do kick up the quality and standards and expectations, then an all-modern building would be acceptable in Automobile Alley, as long as there's a relationship to scale and proportion so that it really fits from that standpoint. It's not about materiality all the time. It's about this visual connection between the historic nature of it and a modern insertion. I think that's the last image. So those are my thoughts, and I'm happy to share that's the results of the conversations with the Automobile Alley Design Committee.
Any questions for Rand? Okay. David? Do we have any other people in the audience that would like to speak? Okay.
During Rand's presentation, he discussed that there should be punched openings in the facades that address the street. I defy you to show me in the guidelines that we need to use punched openings anywhere. Our structural scale, I appreciate Mr. Elliott's efforts. His heart is in the right place, and he truly believes that his solution is better than ours. But I think that's subjective. And when do you guys get into dictating subjective decisions? Our structural grid is not compatible with any one of the schemes that he just showed. He's got an addition, he's got a separation between his new addition and our building that doesn't go up 3 floors. It comes over at 2 floors high, and we need the space all the way over to the existing building. His guideline or reference of the projects that he showed, in my opinion, mimics every building on the block. If that's what you want, you need to change your guideline. His idea of putting a brick column on the corner that still keeps it a glass corner is a solution of the 1900s. And it is subjective. I say, Laura, could I get you to do something for me? I will say this. We've met with them twice, and they gave us several. This is what you got previous, and this was changed. This is not what the report was based on, because we were trying to react to comments made by the committee itself and members. I never wanted to put the filigree between the arcade, the Castone Arcade, and I suggested that we shouldn't do that.
Laura, could you put up the one without?
Hold on, I'm going to show you something else besides that. I'm prepared to show you something else.
Okay.
There was some positive comments that came out of our last meeting. Can you get to the PDFs that I brought? And one was, we agree that the corner of the building should not express the structural grid that you see that's common inside in internal buildings. But what we were doing initially was reflecting the building that was closest to us across the street. But if that's an issue, we have a solution for that. Keep going. Keep going. You got about 12. The only reason I didn't show this earlier was I was told to present the building that was shown. This is the one I wanted you to get to. Thank you.
Thank you.
This has 4 changes, all of those which came out of our meeting with them on last Friday. One is we've changed the south facade to all brick. We are not expressing the concrete frame as we had previously done. Number 2, once we did that, when we had the concrete frame on there, it was not appropriate, in our opinion, to put awnings on those windows. But once that goes to all brick, it's very appropriate to put awnings on it. So the upper floors of that facade now, we would like to put awnings on. The other one that's obvious is we've taken the panels out between the cast stone. And the fourth one is, and this was a comment that came from that meeting, is that we should align our lowest canopy with the height of the canopy on the existing building, which, after looking at it, we agree. So it is not that we aren't listening to comments that come from these. I'm sorry, you're looking at me starstruck.
With a question mark.
Okay.
Right. So was this something that you would have presented to us, but you'd already?
Yes.
Okay.
And in fact, I'm offering it to you now as that's something we would do, and we're happy to go forward with that. By the way, we took one of the fins off of that corner, one of the glass fins. And if that's an issue, we'll take all of the glass fins off the corner.
Speaking for staff, we were comfortable with removing the filigree or whatever you call it from the upper part of the windows on Broadway. However, the rest of the revisions were not something that, I didn't present that to you, and as such would suggest, if we're going to that point, that staff would appreciate the opportunity to evaluate that, come back to you with that.
Okay. I can make one comment about this rendering. This one, I feel like, helps me, but it also, after hearing Rand's presentation, I also understand a little bit more about what bugs me about that colonnade, and that is that so much of Automobile Alley has that strong horizontal motif, while this is very vertical.
Just like the Daily Oklahoman on that corner of its corner.
It's pretty far away.
Yeah, but we're also the bookends of Broadway.
But this isn't a bookend building. This is part of the context of the Broadway building.
It's a bookend of our other end of the building as well.
Okay. So, anything else? You want some additional comments or questions or motions or whatever?
So are you saying we cannot vote on this one?
No, Laura said we couldn't vote on this.
I didn't say we couldn't. Staff requested that, or suggested we don't have an issue with removing that detailing on the window. However, the rest of the revisions is not something that we've prepared any kind of a response to you concerning those.
Okay.
And whatever you all do is obviously up to you.
What about legally? It wasn't noticed.
I think if it wasn't noticed, then you probably need to come back if nobody got notice of this particular.
Well, let me just say, as far as the wording goes, because when we do the notice, it doesn't have the picture. And so the way that this was advertised, I'm reading off this, construct 3-story building, addition of brick, cast stone, concrete panels, storefront curtain wall systems, metal panel siding, and metal canopies. So I think from that perspective, I don't know if there's an issue with the way it was advertised, because it was generically describing a project, which could also fit with what this is.
Okay. Yeah, I think it would just be that if you don't have the drawings to show.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Elevations are and things like that, and you may not have enough information but that's up to you all.
Okay, thanks.
I would submit also, Betsy, that the difference between, really the major difference between this and Mr. Elliott's suggestions is whether or not we have to put a brick corner on the corner. If you look at the similarities between several of what he showed, and you put his solution into our grid, it's very, very similar. But
okay.
I believe we met or exceeded every Automobile Alley guideline and or every DDRC ordinance. And after that, wow.
Well,
maybe from now on we should just, and I'd like to explain something. We were under a tremendous time crunch to try to get this in, and so we met with the building committee board the day before we could turn it in to the city. We turned it into the city, and on that day, I began to contact Jane to try to arrange a meeting, and we met with them as fast as we possibly could after that. There is no intention to keep this from anybody. And in fact, we're proud of it. We're ready to show it to all of the world, and we're ready to build it.
Okay. Any other comments?
I just want to make a comment that, so as the, non-architect, or one of the non-architects in the group, really I have to look at 2 or 3 things. One, is there an exception? And, in the staff report, there really isn't like an exception that we need to try to overcome, really. I mean, it is into being pretty subjective. We're not having to get an adjustment on any kind of, height or standoff or anything like that. And so it checks that box. And then 2, do I like it? And yes, I like it. Like, I would like to see that, on my drive home every day. And I'd like to see that as part of Automobile Alley. And the last thing is really, is it high quality? And that's when I do kind of defer to you guys. High quality materials, as far as I can tell, absolutely, high quality architect, high quality organization. And so, to me, it's to me, I'm in favor of it, and I know that there's always going to be differences in opinion on the exact, architectural elements. But at the end of the day, we have to just really look at our guidelines, and what they tell us. And if there is some heartburn over kind of the horizontal aspect versus the rest of the buildings, I can see that now that it's been pointed out to me. I don't know if I would have been able to pick that out, or I don't know if I would have viewed that negatively had that not been pointed out to me. But and unless there is a desire to maybe restaff this second version that's being shown on the screen now, if I could see that being the case, and if so, it can be continued until next month, and I'd happily vote for it. Or if there is a preference to go ahead and with the current design that was already staffed, I'd be for that as well. And so that's where I stand on it.
I think I'd like to just, to Nathaniel, I think, and also to Mr. Hornbeek, this is, and Betsy's kind of touched us in the past, but this is a design committee, and we kind of have the challenge as a design committee to interpret subjective, presentations. And it is difficult, and it is subjective. So each of us comes to it with their own, diverse experience and background, and approach it that way. And so, with that said, I think I'd just like to touch on a couple more comments that I had that may be perceived as subjective, but I think they're perfectly qualified for this type of committee. And I guess I'm just going to touch on two, because most people, I think some of the concerns are brought up already, but I guess my overall reaction when I saw the presentation was that I liked that it was in the corner, there's 3 stories. I thought that was great. As I looked at each elevation plus the existing, to me it looked like we were proposing 4 different buildings. It was like the existing building, we had Broadway elevation, south elevation, east elevation. I didn't see any kind of contiguous element that maybe tied all of these elements together in some way. And now, of course, I understand some of the elements that you've referenced from the existing building. My comment would be that the references are fairly weak. I don't read them strongly in the elevations. Without being pointed out to me, I wouldn't have interpreted it that way. And I think, lastly, when I looked at the floor plan, I was curious because you have your curtain wall on the Broadway elevation. But when I looked at the floor plan, the offices are also on the Broadway side. When I look at the offices, they lend themselves to be a modular element. They have a rhythm in the way that the offices are placed on that side. And you look at your east elevation, where you have a lot of variation in that plan because you have conference rooms, training rooms, things that don't necessarily modularly lay out in a plan. And so, just looking at the floor plan, it almost looked like the elevations were, interpretation should be or could be reversed, where your more modular element is apparent on that Broadway side and may, in fact, relate more to the existing fabric on that elevation, and that the east elevation may lend itself more to a modern interpretation with their curtain wall. So, those are my opinions, and subjective or not, I think they're appropriate for the committee.
Okay.
Mr. Hornbeek, you asked for a reference within the ordinance that would support some of the discussion that's going on here. And the section under building design states that districts should promote architectural diversity while encouraging design that relates to and reinforces the overall character of the immediate surroundings. So that is where my perspective is coming from, to reinforce the overall character of the immediate surroundings. And as Betsy said, this is a very important building, and its site bears much more weight than if it was not on Broadway. It is located within a historic district that has an established historic character. And I very much feel that a modern building can be modern and still address that historic character. Each one of the contemporary examples that you presented were full curtain wall buildings. What's being presented here is something of a mixture where clearly on the south side of the building, there is an understanding of the existing character of Automobile Alley, and even more so in the rendering that's up than what was in the package. That that south facade does relate to the character of the neighborhood, but the west facade, in my opinion, deviates too much from that character.
Any other comments? Any other comments from the audience?
Rand Elliott. I would ask for your real understanding about the decision you're about to make and why it is so incredibly important. This will set a precedent for other things going on Broadway. If you just look at the proposed solution, and I respect David and his work and practice and all that, but I think this building is the wrong building for this location. The suggestions of the drawings were not my ideas. They were intended to be guidelines to say these are the kinds of things that you do in interpreting a modern building in a historic neighborhood. That's what's so important here. It's not about just any building. It has to have a certain rigor to it. It has to have a real appreciation and a respect for the neighborhood that it's going in. And as Corey said, it could be a great modern building as long as the proportion and scale worked. If this is accepted, this will send Automobile Alley into another condition which suggests that we would accept less than great solutions less than what the neighborhood deserves. And I would just encourage you to give serious consideration to this. We've suggested to the Community Foundation group that we're happy to sit and brainstorm ideas or whatever it requires to try to find a solution that everybody likes. And we're happy to do that at their disposal. So please consider this a very serious decision, and I hope that you respect the neighborhood. Thank you.
Ten years ago, when we submitted this previously, the same committee stood before you and said this was a suburban solution and don't go down that slippery slope and allow that building to be built.
And you made concessions, and you came up with a great building that we all...
I don't believe we made...
You did.
What concessions did we make?
You continued it, and you made some concessions. I'm the only...
Yeah, I'll tell you what we did.
You and I were the only two people in the room.
We put a
there.
planter at the corner because we were told to hold the corner. But we did not change the design of the building. In fact,
you did some windows on the north side that are not really windows, but they're... Well, maybe they really are windows.
They were already in.
I know you came back more than once, and we appreciate that, and I kind of see that as happening right now.
And while I really truly believe Mr. Elliott's heart and intentions here are to do the best thing, are you going to tell me that what everybody should do from now on is go meet with Rand and sit down and collaborate on design before we bring it to you? Are you, I'm amazed that you allowed him to show all of that stuff before you ever saw it. You got to see that today.
Well, but that's all existing, and that's all stuff that we could always, the design part was not, but...
Betsy, you're about to go down a slippery slope yourself on this deal.
Now, I'm not saying that the design solution that was shown in those slides was, I don't think it was intended to be an acceptable design solution. I think it was to show the elements that would be repeated and make the character of the building more in keeping with the area.
So,
Corey, do you want to?
So the guideline says don't mimic, and are you telling me that's not mimicking? I read the definition of mimic to you. It's, okay, all right. I feel like I'm a plaintiff and the accused, and the only reason I came back up here before the last time is because, at least in a court of law, the plaintiff gets to say the last word. We ask that you vote on, and if you could, vote on that proposal right there, and if you disapprove it, we'd like to know what your concerns are, because we want to work and address the DDRC's concerns.
Okay, Corey?
I was, at the moment, just going to jump in and say that what was presented visually is not no one's suggesting that that be a replacement of the design at this point. My concerns are the expression of the curtain wall, and that expression being something that does not fit within the context of the existing automobile alley character. There's, from what I understand, an intent to make this building look different than the existing building, and I don't think that that's been achieved. And what's surprising is, if that is the intent, that's an opportunity to design something new that could fit within the character of the existing automobile alley, whereas the west facade very much, in my opinion, is pulling from the existing building, which I was not part of the review of that building, but I would have had some concerns with that design as well in its aesthetics relative to the overall character of the neighborhood.
So are you saying that if that south facade, if the brick went all the way to the corner instead of the glass kind of wrapping around, is that the change? I guess I'm wondering, like, if we want to give him feedback, what would that feedback be? And instead of saying what should he not do, could we say what he should do? Maybe it's more of a question just for me to help me out.
Well, I'd prefer not to, from the standpoint of, I don't believe it's our position to design the building. I think it's the designer's responsibility to hear our comments and provide a solution that potentially works with them. So I intentionally do not want to be prescriptive on how to revise the building design, but solely point out the issues that I do have with it. And so, again, at the top of the list for me is that glass corner, yes.
So, Corey, I suggested a more modern, more like a glass block box that would remove itself entirely from the neighborhood. Can you address that? Do you think that would be totally wrong?
That's tough to comment on, obviously, without seeing what it is.
Sorry.
Could that be achieved? Potentially, sure. I think it would be a much greater challenge to do something like that. But what's being presented is not a complete departure. That's part of where my hang-up is as well, is that there are elements and aspects of this building that very much do respect the character of the neighborhood, like the south facade. And there are also aspects of the design that don't. And it's that contrast between the two that I think is really straining this design.
I might suggest that makes it a 21st century building to start.
Well, I don't know that we want to go down that path either, because there's, I mean, a 21st century building is a building built in the 21st century. And there are dozens and dozens of aesthetics that make up wonderful, beautiful buildings that were built in the 21st century. And I would hesitate to pigeonhole a certain style or design aesthetic into defining what a 21st century building is.
What I would like to ask, would you be willing to take a continuance and take a look at some different solutions?
I would need to ask my client.
Okay.
I'm Nancy Anthony with the Oklahoma City Community Foundation. We had a lot of discussion, obviously, about this and and have tried to work with Automobile Alley. At the last meeting, the question is, do we, in fact, try to do a continuance, or do we come to the Downtown Design Review Committee? And I think because you are the group of people that must approve this, and it is, in fact, your concerns and your both objections and suggestions that are important, we elected to come here with what we had so that we would know if it wasn't going to be approved, what would be approved. So it's really you that we need to know what we need to do. And so that's what it's sitting in the back. I'm sitting back there trying to say, I don't know, a continuance with some solutions. I mean, we have an architect that we've hired to do that, and we have a committee.
He's a very good architect.
Right, and we have a committee that needs to, I mean, obviously, I can't build a building that my trustees don't want, okay? So I've got another group of people that I have to deal with. So effectively, there's some process here that has to be dealt with. But so to know, I mean, you have guidelines and you have things that we've tried to follow, so that's obviously what the presentation was. But if there are things outside of that you're telling, we just need to be real clear about it so that when we come back, I can go to my trustees with something that they concur, and then we can bring something to you that you concur. And I'm not really sure that we're clear about that.
What if we did a little poll as to the specific things that we're looking for from each person, so that you could take that back with you?
And that's fine, and there are two people that aren't here.
Right.
And I mean, I guess
Right,
I'm just
you're right.
we just have a moving target. That's what I'm concerned about. So
So you're willing, if you get some input, you're willing
if we
to
get
have
the
it
input, but we
continue.
just need to be clear about the input so that when we come back and have addressed it, we don't have other input or we don't have other things. That's what I'm concerned about.
For what it's worth, which you never know who's going to be here and who's not, but we have to have a quorum. All of the architects and the landscape architect that are on the committee are here right now, so we can. And you've heard what Nathaniel has said, which he's ready to go with the design right now. So.
Okay, thank you.
So you would be willing to go for a continuance?
I guess if we're clear about what it is we're trying to bring back. Again, you're not. I mean, it's not me. I mean, this isn't a one-person deal. I have 15 trustees.
Right.
Okay.
And Rand and his committee have offered to.
Right, I understand that, but that's a moving target too.
Okay.
Okay. There have been different people at the two different committee meetings that we've had with them. So, and Automobile Alley is a group of people. There are other people that are on Automobile Alley that don't participate in the Automobile Alley Association. So it's not necessarily a unified group of responses either. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm going to take a poll of what the kind of thing we're looking for, and hopefully that will be helpful. Okay.
I'll start. And so on the west facade and the corner that wraps, I would like to see more of an expression of punched openings within a facade that do emphasize the horizontal. And in wrapping the corner, certainly not wrapping the corner in glass, having a hard corner potentially in brick.
So do you have any issue with curtain walls somewhere in the vocabulary?
Not if it's used in a way that represents more of a punched opening.
Okay.
Well, I think anything, super specific would be, maybe that cast stone element to me, I guess I was kind of trying to make the point of, we have offices on that side. If we could look at getting that cast stone element to read more as punched openings, which would, it would read more like the other buildings in the area. I think it would fit in a bit more. And maybe potentially actually address your concern, Betsy, which may, take away a little bit of the verticality and express more of the punched opening or horizontal motif that you see on Outer Alley. And then lastly, the east elevation with the metal panel. I don't know that metal panel is appropriate on that elevation, even off the backside. I don't know if I'm strong. I don't think I would object to it. I just say I would encourage you to look at some other type of material that may help the building read more cohesively on that elevation.
And then I've expressed my concern of the verticality shown, exhibited by that colonnade. I think it is actually helped by some of the mullion patterns that are shown in this more recent elevation, but I feel like it really contrasts in a bad way, like with the rest of Otto Alley. So that's my opinion, and that's part of what we do here is we have to express our opinions. And Nathaniel has already said his piece. So, Nancy?
Oh, no,
we have a quorum.
We do. We still have 4. Oh, 4 is a quorum. Okay, I'm sorry. We'll just
I thought
request a
it was 5
continuance.
too, so.
We'll just request a continuance, if that's appropriate.
And let me clarify, if it's a continuance to the November meeting, we have to have everything by next Tuesday. So we could still continue it to November, and if we don't get everything by then, at the November meeting, we could continue it to December. So that would give them that opportunity.
Continue it to November, and then if you need more time, we'll continue it to December.
Okay.
Yeah, Jane?
First of all, I appreciate the Community Foundation's willing to do a continuance, but just to go on the record as saying what Laura said really represents that's part of the problem. You can request a continuance, but then you have to have stuff for the November continuance by next Tuesday, which gives us very little time as Automobile Alley to try it, because as you can understand, it does take time to get that done. And there's nothing you can change. I just want to say we need to look at the process, a little bit differently so that we can help them. I mean, I understand their need for something timely, but Automobile Alley is an important part of downtown, and this is going to be a very important building there, and we want to make sure that the neighborhood is really on board with what happens.
So, if ever, I'm not promising for anyone else, but if it became an issue where we needed to have a meeting later and we needed a special meeting, we have done that in the past. So if there is a timeline that Oklahoma City Community Foundation wants to get that done, and a presentation would be between the November and December meetings.
I'm just saying, even taking the Automobile Alley piece out of it, so to speak, the way that it is now, if with your comments and you vote for a continuance, even if they didn't have to go back and coordinate with Automobile Alley, Nancy still has to get it to her Board of Trustees. She still has her building committee. There's, from Thursday to Tuesday to try to make the kind of substantive changes that you need to try to get a successful. I'm not
totally understand.
I'm just going on the record to try to say we need to take a look at this type of process, particularly when you're dealing with nonprofits, because of the layers of it's not just the client and the architect. There's other people that have a responsibility there, and the way the process is that we're here in November. We're probably going to continue it, and probably the next time we can really get something substantive that could pass this board. is December, and that puts them way behind their schedule. I'm just talking about process, not anything else.
I understand. Thank you, Jane. Do we have a motion?
I'll move to continue this item to the November meeting.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you, guys. Thanks very much for your patience. The next item is 400 North Walnut.
In your packet, there was kind of a recap. Some of you were around when this was before this committee before, but I believe there's at least two of you who weren't on the committee yet. And so this building, if you've ever gone up North Walnut, has sat there since last year plus, with the stairs and the front entrance basically kind of ripped off the building. It's a pending item. It was denied. It's a pending item before the Board of Adjustment, and so that results in a pending code enforcement case. So as you saw from your packet, there's a request to put up what is not intended to be the permanent cladding to replace what got ripped off, but Mr. Box will explain probably in greater words than I can how we are here today and what their proposal is to solve this.
Good morning, almost good afternoon as of right now.
Yes.
David Box, 522 Colcord Drive. I don't know if my words will be greater, perhaps just different. I, like Mr. Harding, am not an architect, so I do apologize at the outset. Perhaps my words will be slightly different than the 3 hours we've heard thus far. What we have is a unique case before you. We've got a situation where the non-historical stairs on this building at 400 North Walnut were removed some time ago. They were removed without a CA. When I was first called to join into this discussion, it was, I believe, March of 2015. And at the time, there was a developer here with me, as well as an architect, that had a design proposal. That design proposal contemplated removal of the non-historic stairs. Unfortunately, the contractor that did the work did so without the CA. What has since transpired in the last 18 months has been a tailspin of trying to get the citation remedied. We've had a change in desire for the building, and so what the owner of the building now seeks to do is to sell it. As you might imagine, trying to sell a building with pending litigation from the city for a zoning violation is rather difficult. Nobody wants to buy something with pending problems with the city. So what we attempt to do through this application is to remedy that. We've got a unique situation where in order to get rid of the citation, we have to have a CA or reconstruct the non-historical stairs. Ms. Chronister and staff has made it clear they do not support reconstructing the non-historical stairs. So what that leaves us with is we come before this DDRC hoping that we can get the CA for the demolition that's already taken place. What that will allow us to do is to pay our court costs, but remove the citation so that this can be sold to a developer that can then come in, rethink what they want this building to be, and come before this committee with a fully thought-out design proposal. It's almost impossible for any potential property owner to really undertake spending money with architects or any professionals without the knowledge that they're actually going to be able to design a project without first taking care of city citations. So what we propose to do and what I've handed out, the first page is what it looks like today. The last page is showing we've cleaned up the trash, so to speak, and we've come back with brick. And working with staff suggested that we also propose perhaps an alternative. So what you see are three different images. One, the second page is hardy board with, I guess the color would match the columns. Next, it's a hardy board, but the color would match the bricks. And finally, the last page is, like I said, kind of the brick. All of this is intended to be a temporary solution. Again, it's designed to get approval to remedy the wrong that was previously committed, to allow us to get rid of the city citation so that property can transact, a new owner can come in, sit down with their design team, come up with a development plan without the pressure of a pending municipal court citation, and then come up with this thoughtful plan that they can then come before the DDRC before anything ever gets built.
And let me clarify, they only had one of the proposed in their packet, which is the one, the Hardy Board one. So you were referencing some others, and I just wanted to say the one in your packet is the Hardy Board solution.
What I was to understand is that the notice said cladding, and as far as Lisa was concerned, cladding could be the brick.
It could be, yes. But I just, you don't have a picture in your packet of that?
I understand.
And I believe there was a, you had a picture of that?
All of these were provided to staff, but Ms. Cronister wanted us to also provide the Hardy Board. My client doesn't care.
And the reality is that even though you feel like it's a temporary solution, very likely could be a permanent solution.
I would say not likely, because the building is currently not occupied.
Right.
And by denying this application, all it does is, perpetuate the problem that we're in now.
I'm thinking about
Sure.
what this is going to look like from now until the building is developed.
And our goal was to just make it look clean, so that when you drive by, you don't say, what in the world's going on there, which is what you probably say now. I do understand your problem, but I'll tell you that the person that is attempting to sell the building really wants to sell the building. Anybody that's looking to buy it really wants to redevelop the building. So, although these are just my words, I think the practical application is, if you do approve it and this temporary cladding is done, I think staff's done a good job in the staff report to ensure that the intent is for this to be a temporary solution.
So there is not an architect involved in this. This is strictly to provide, clean it up, and put some kind of cladding on the front.
Correct. There will be an architect, but again, the current owner doesn't have a desire to redevelop it.
Right.
Is it our understanding that these 3 pages are being presented as options for recladding it?
Yeah, any of the 3. My client originally proposed brick. Ms. Cronister suggested he also proposed some Hardy Board, but I think it's whatever the
I
committee...
think the concern about the brick is it looks like a more permanent solution. And with the Hardy Board, to us, to staff, it gave an appearance of temporary to be determined, for trading values or whatever. I mean, there's no time frame involved, but felt that someone redeveloping the building would want to address that so that they could dress it up in some fashion. It could be all kinds of things.
I actually think the brick, even if it does look like a permanent solution, would be the better solution, considering we don't know 100% what's going to happen. If nothing happens for the next 20 years, I would prefer to see that base be brick than be the Hardy Board.
I agree.
Has any of the brick from the staircase been salvaged?
I think it's all still in the pile.
It's still in the pile.
I think as soon as the citations were issued, everybody's run from it. And so I think a lot of it is still there in that pile. Now, I'll tell you, there wasn't a whole lot of brick in that because they weren't the historical stairs.
Right.
And they were. There's the image of what it looked like.
Yeah, so those 2 faces that are shown there.
Those weren't, because that, originally it didn't have those 2 brick faces.
Right.
So these,
I guess
depending on your perspective of historic. The
point I'm trying to get to is there enough brick there or salvage to reuse brick in cladding this opening?
We can certainly try. It is my belief that all the brick that was demolished is still literally sitting there. If you look at that first picture on the left side, you'll see the mix of concrete and bricks.
Right. Well,
whether or not there's enough to do that entire...
Well, and how many of them are still in one piece?
Yeah.
So I would say my preference out of these 3 would be to reclad in brick, and if there are enough existing salvageable bricks, to use the existing bricks on site as that cladding.
Yeah, we'll see if that's a possibility.
So are there any contrary opinions to that?
No, I just have a question. So I already said I'm not an architect. I'm also not a lawyer. There's a lot of things that I'm not. But how does it make it, so how does the city's okay with just, if you clean that up and then put brick over it, then like the citation goes away, I guess?
The
Because
citation,
it doesn't undo what was done. I mean, what was done was
right.
was
The citation
not
was
correct.
for work being done without a CA. They tried to get a CA, and it got denied. It included redoing the front and some other things. So if they get a CA from you for recladding it in some fashion, that would make the violation go away, because we've issued a CA, and their pending appeal, then I guess, would die, because it's not needed anymore.
So the kind of after the fact CA or application was
Yes.
to mimic the old stairs or
No, the application was for totally different, it was a different design on the
this was
front.
just
It
kinda
involved
reset.
a lot of stuff, and they were adding on different places. It was a whole redevelopment of the building.
So this would reset it, and so basically, whoever comes in they're going to have to make, the committee happy with their new plans, but by doing this solution, it just kind of resets all that, and what's past is past, and they...
And I hate to do this, but do we have a motion on this, please?
I'll move to approve the application on the basis that the project complies with the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District zoning ordinance, as referenced in Section C and D of the staff report, with the unique circumstance that although the non-historic existing stair was demolished without a certificate of approval, clearing the site and installing new cladding is in the best interest of the building's redevelopment, with the following two conditions. One, the cladding be of brick and cast stone as shown in the third option as presented in today's meeting, and B, if enough of the existing stone from the half-demolished existing staircase is salvageable, that brick be used as the brick cladding.
Is that acceptable?
Yeah, we'll certainly do our best.
Second? Anybody? Okay, that was a Bates-Terrio motion. All in favor? Any opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and we need to reconsider the last motion where the Oklahoma City Community Foundation would continue until December instead of November. Who made that motion?
I made that motion.
Okay, can you
So I move to
reconsider?
reconsider my motion and continue item 6F to the December meeting.
Do we have a second?
Okay.
All in favor? Any opposed? All right. Thank you.
And we'll get with them on deadlines for their additional
Thanks for working
information.
with us, Tony.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank David, too. Okay, now, I think, here we go. We're going to have a presentation. Is Robin Zerfuth? You've been with us before. Hi, welcome. Thank you. So you're going to do a quick presentation on, I'm sorry, I know
another meeting in here.
You've been very patient.
I feel like you guys are probably very tired and hungry, so maybe we'll be respectfully brief. So I think you have all the information from all the way through a staff report for the project that we're working on. I'm the architect from Atlanta that's working with the JRB office and the JRB parking development to redevelop the Journal Record building, the part that's not the museum, into office space, and that's well underway, and we're really excited about it. The project that I'm here to talk to you about today is the associated parking structure that supports that office use. And so, given that the only action that you'll take today was the continuance vote that you did earlier, and we're prepared to come back, and that's great. It's what I really want to do is just kind of go through a little bit of the design thinking that's gone into it, take a look at the renderings, and get some early feedback from you, so that when we do come back, we can incorporate incorporate any of the changes that might need to, or adjustments that might need to happen for the project. So as you're aware, this is a pay surface lot that's across the street from the National Memorial Plaza, as well as catty corner from the Journal Record building. It's the entire surface lot. It extends from North Robinson down 5th Street to the alley that then continues onto Broadway. The lot is actually owned by the city, and it's held by the developers as a long-term 99-year lease, and it is supported with an economic development contract and set of requirements that go with it. So the purpose is to provide parking for the Journal Record building. So what we're presenting today is a partial development of the site, and so as you look at the site plan, you can see that the corner of North Robinson and 5th is still grandfathering in that little portion of the existing paved surface lot. The intention of that is to complete the redevelopment of the Journal Record building with the parking that's associated with it, but to preserve that more prime location for future development. So the intention for that end of the site is to when the market is ready for it, construct a building that includes street front uses, that it may be commercial office, it may be multifamily. It's not a fully fleshed out plan yet for what that building will be, but we're preserving that sort of prime street frontage for those uses. And ultimately we'll be developing the whole lot. We've designed this parking deck such that the wall that is at the furthest west end of the building is built as a party wall, so it will allow that to happen. The design for the structure is it is a precast parking deck that we are cladding on the primary facades, which we consider to be 5th Street especially, as well as the facade that faces Robinson in a temporary way. We are looking to screen the precast material on the 5th Street side with horizontal mesh panels that are structured and then gently uplit. We're looking to screen the west side with similar metal panels and lighting, as well as a series of vertical fins on the building to create shadow lines. There's also our intention is to have lighting on the edges, the knife edges of each of those fins, to be able to respond a little bit to the forms that are across the street in the memorial gates, as well as, in sort of an interesting way, it's a little bit of a throwback to the YMCA that was there that had those vertical fins that were also on that facade of the building. And the materiality of the structure is intended to be a limestone veneer on the stair towers and on the base all along 5th Street, and then the painted metal perforated screening. The precast that will be visible to you from North Robinson is intended to have integral color in it, so that it will be a dark gray, and that sort of completes the palette that is respectful of what's happening with the memorial across the street. The alley facades are scheduled to be painted and scheduled to receive at least one of the lighting elements on each of the columns along the back, but without a huge amount of investment on those alley facades. The streetscape on 5th Street, all of the improvements that have been made by Downtown OKC will remain, and we are actually extending the sidewalk, widening the sidewalk by a couple of feet, because we know we're going to have a good bit of pedestrian traffic that's coming from this building and then going across the street and over to the Journal Record building. And right now the sidewalk's only about 4 feet deep behind the benches. North Robinson will be unchanged, so all of the improvements that the city has made on that side, including the decorative pavement and the tree wells, will stay. The trees that are on both sides of the lot will be preserved and maintained or replaced. We've got a couple of them that are in the new curb cuts that are going in on 5th Street, so we'll replace those curb cuts and trees. And that's kind of the gist of what we've got.
Awesome. So my understanding is this was an opportunity for us to make comments.
It is.
I'll just start really quickly, and then we'll kind of poll everyone else. I appreciate the fins and the harkening back to the YMCA. I think maybe hardly anybody on this committee that's left even remembers it, but I remember when it went away, and I was very sad. But I do, one of my big things about this committee is it's for an urban area, and I feel like it's very important to engage the pedestrian, and I feel like there's a lot of pedestrians here, even though this is not clued in as one of the high-level required streets for retail. I feel like there's a great opportunity for retail in this building, and I would like to see more anything that would engage the pedestrian in this building.
At the street level?
At the street level.
On the Fifth Street side?
Yes.
Okay. Because just sort of the development plan has that prioritized for happening up along Robinson and at the corner?
Well, and we don't, we live in a boom and bust environment here, so that could happen in a year, and it could happen in 10 years or 20 years, and I want it now.
Okay.
I agree with Betsy's comments, and it's just a general statement. I think it looks really nice. I like the palette and just the overall look of the garage, and it's one of the better garages we've seen, and yeah, so I like it. That's all.
It's intended to be kind of elegantly recessive, so hopefully we've done it.
I think you have. I think you've done a very nice job as well. Appreciate the limestone at Fifth Street very much. I think from a materiality standpoint, that does engage the pedestrian on a much more tangible, kind of intimate level than putting precast right on the sidewalk. I appreciate the scale and then how the scale has been broken down by the screens, and appreciate the treatment of the west facade. I think actually, putting some emphasis on there is an acknowledgement that that building might come, that building might not come. And even with the intent of a building being there, I appreciate addressing that facade at this time. The one comment I would have is, given the attention that you've placed on lighting elements around the building, to just be conscious of how the external lighting elements interact with the internal general illumination. We've had some garages where the general illumination has been pulled to the exterior of the building so much that it washes out onto the sidewalk, and really you get a lot of light pollution. Thank you.
Yeah, so you're referring to the interior parking deck lights, kind of throwing light out.
Right, yeah, and not only from a pedestrian experience, but given how you've created these lighting elements, I think the lighting elements are great and they should have their place and not have the interior general illumination compete with that.
I think that's smart. Thank you.
Okay. Nathaniel?
I like the limestone. I like the design. So I'll just echo what they said. Thanks.
Okay.
That was easy.
Well, that was easy, yeah.
Do you have any questions of us?
Well, no. I mean, I'll certainly take the information back to the rest of the design team and the development team and see what's happening. I mean, I do. The one thing that I feel like we have done is, at least on Fifth Street, we've left all the openings at ground level open, so that you can pass through them. And I know that's not the same as an active use, but it is at least an engagement that keeps people from being inside.
I do like the limestone, by the way. Okay. I think that's something we all agree on.
We're unanimous on that.
What's the total parking count as it is right now?
It's the documents you have say 420. It's actually 380.
Okay.
Inside the deck, and then there's about 15 spaces on the surface lot in the front. And then there is on-street parking that is currently there that we will restripe, and we'll work with the city to get the meters back in the right place.
What's driving that count? I'm just curious.
The count is based on the 3.5 per thousand of usable space in the Journal Record building, because the building is by its nature very inefficient. So we didn't count the rentable square footage against the parking because that was sort of an inflated calculation. And then it includes an additional 50 spaces that are unaccounted for. That can potentially be available to the public. There's also the weekends and the simultaneous or non-simultaneous occupancy issues that will make some of those spaces available. The other thing that's not stated in here is the garage will be structured to allow for parking for the next use, which would be a completely different discussion with the group. It's sort of the planning ahead. We'll size the foundations in a way that it can take that.
As far as extending the height?
Great, thank you very much.
Okay.
So thanks for your patience.
We continued this to November, and
We already did, yeah.
Yeah, just as a reminder, Tuesday is the deadline for any revisions to make it in that packet, so.
Okay, we'll do it.
Okay.
Thank you so much for allowing us to have a few minutes.
Thank you, and thanks for your patience. Next order of business is, there's an administrative approval report, and I think I'm going to have Laura go through each and every single, no, I'm not. No way. Comments from the planning department staff?
Just that we have a meeting next month already scheduled in addition to the ones that just got continued, so.
Okay. Comments from committee members? Thank you guys for sticking this out. It's been a long one, and we tried really hard. We worked it. Next meeting is November 17th. Thanks very much for being here. We are adjourned.